7 biblical signs that God may have given you the gift of freedom. There comes a moment in the spiritual life when something begins to feel different inside you. The pressure that once controlled your decision starts to lose its grip. The fear that once dictated your reactions becomes quieter. The need to prove yourself to others begins to fade. You may not be able to explain exactly when the change started, but you notice that your heart feels lighter, your mind feels clearer, and your decisions feel more intentional. This change is often subtle. It does not arrive with dramatic emotion. It does not appear as a sudden breakthrough. Instead, it develops gradually through experience, reflection, and growth. You begin to realize that certain habits no longer control you. Certain expectations no longer define you. Certain fears no longer silence you. What once felt like pressure begins to feel like distance. Many people misunderstand freedom. They believe freedom means doing whatever they want without limitation. They have freed families of rules, responsibility, disciplini. But biblical freedom is very different. It is not the removal of structure. It is the presence of clarity. It is the ability to make decisions without being controlled by fear, guilt, or approval. It is the strength to act according to truth rather than emotion. Psychologically, freedom often begins with awareness. People who grow in self-understanding start recognizing patterns in their behavior. They notice what triggers anxiety. They identify habits that create stress. They begin separating their identity from their mistakes. This process creates confidence because decisions become intentional rather than reactive. Spiritually, freedom is often the result of transformation. God does not simply remove burdens. He changes perspective. He reshapes priorities. He strengthens discipline. Over time, individuals begin to live with greater peace because they understand their values and trust their direction. Freedom becomes visible in daily behavior, in patience, restraint, courage, and responsibility. Many people experience freedom long before they recognize it. They stop reacting to criticism immediately. They forgive more easily. They set boundaries without guilt. They make decisions based on conviction rather than pressure. These patterns may seem ordinary, yet they reveal a deeper change, the development of inner stability. In this message, we will explore 7 biblical signs that God may have given you the gift of freedom. These signs are not dramatic or emotional. They appear quietly in daily choices, in calm responses, and in the ability to live without constant fear. Recognizing them can help you understand your growth, strengthen your confidence, and protect the peace that has been forming within you, because freedom is not proven by what you escape. It is revealed by how calmly you live. The first sign that God may have given you the gift of freedom is this: you are no longer controlled by the opinions of others the way you once were. There may have been a time in your life when approval felt essential. You carefully measured your words. You adjusted your behavior to meet expectations. You avoided decisions that might cause disagreement. You felt pressure to be accepted, respected, or understood. Even small criticism could create anxiety. You worried about disappointing people. You feared being misunderstood. At first, this concern may have felt responsible. You believed that listening to others showed humility. You assumed that agreement preserved peace. You tried to maintain harmony by avoiding conflict. Yavor chimisum clear. Living according to the expectations of others created tension inside you. You felt divided between what you believed and what others wanted. Gradually, a quiet shift began to take place. You started listening more carefully to your own convictions. You became more aware of your values. You realized that constant approval is impossible. You understood that disagreement does not always mean failure. What once felt like pressure began to lose its power. This change did not make you rebellious. It made you stable. You began making decisions based on principle rather than fear. You learned to accept that not everyone would agree with your choices. You discovered that peace does not come from pleasing everyone. It comes from living honestly. Scripture often connects freedom with courage. Throughout the Bible, individuals who walked in spiritual freedom learned to stand firm in their convictions. They respected others, yet they did not surrender their judgment. They understood that faithfulness sometimes requires disagreement. Their strength came from clarity, not approval. Psychologically, freedom from approval-seeking strengthens identity. People who rely less on external validation develop stronger self-confidence. They make decisions more consistently. They experience less anxiety because their direction is not dependent on constant reassurance. This stability creates resilience during conflict. Spiritually, this shift often reflects maturity. God frequently teaches individuals to trust their convictions. He allows them to face situations where approval is uncertain. These experiences strengthen courage. They develop independence. They prepare a person to act responsibly without fear of rejection. This process also explains why you may feel calmer during criticism than you once did. You listen carefully, but you do not panic. You consider feedback, but you do not lose direction. You respect opinions, but you do not surrender your judgment. These responses reveal growth. Many people later realize that freedom began when approval lost its control over their decisions. They felt less pressure. They experienced more peace. They acted with greater clarity. What once felt like anxiety became confidence once its source became clear. It may be because you have been given the gift of freedom, the ability to live according to truth rather than pressure. The second sign that God may have given you the gift of freedom is this: you have learned to forgive without holding on to bitterness. There may have been moments in your life when someone disappointed you deeply. A promise was broken, trust was damaged. Words were spoken that left lasting wounds. These experiences can create anger, resentment, and emotional distance. At first, forgiveness may have felt impossible. The pain felt too real. The memory felt too strong. You may have believed that letting go would mean ignoring what happened, but over Chimiganchange, you realized that holding bitterness required energy. It kept your mind focused on the past. It prevented emotional peace. You noticed that resentment created tension inside you, even when the situation had already ended. Gradually, the desire to protect your peace became stronger than the desire to hold on to the pain. This shift did not happen overnight. It developed slowly through reflection, prayer, and experience. You began to understand that forgiveness is not about excusing behavior. It is about releasing control. It is the decision to stop carrying emotional weight that no longer serves you. What once felt like weakness began to reveal itself as strength. Scripture often connects freedom with forgiveness. Throughout the Bible, forgiveness is described as a path to peace. Individuals who released resentment experienced emotional clarity. They regained focus. They restored stability in their lives. Their freedom did not depend on the actions of others. It depended on their willingness to let go. Psychologically, forgiveness reduces emotional stress. People who release resentment experience lower anxiety and improved emotional balance. They regain mental energy. They become more present in their daily lives. This process creates resilience because attention shifts from past injury to present growth. Spiritually, forgiveness reflects transformation. God frequently teaches individuals to forgive so they can experience freedom from emotional burdens. He strengthens patience. He builds compassion. He reshapes perspective. These experiences create maturity because they require discipline and humility. This process also explains why forgiveness often feels like relief rather than surrender. You may notice that anger fades more quickly than before. You may find it easier to move forward after disappointment. You may feel less emotional tension when remembering difficult experiences. These changes reveal growth. Many people later realize that forgiveness restored their peace. It reduced stress. It strengthened relationships. It created emotional stability. What once felt impossible became natural once freedom began to form. When you are able to forgive without carrying bitterness, it is often not because the pain disappeared. It may be because you have been given the gift of freedom, the ability to release emotional burdens and protect your peace. And through that freedom, God may be guiding you toward a life marked by clarity, resilience, and emotional strength. The third sign that God may have given you the gift of freedom is this: you no longer feel the same urgency to prove your worth, your intelligence, or your success to others. There may have been a season in your life when recognition felt essential. You worked hard to be noticed. You wanted your efforts to be acknowledged. You felt pressure to demonstrate competence, to show progress, to earn respect. You compared your path to the paths of others. You measured your value through results, approval, or visible achievement. Even small setbacks could feel discouraging because they seemed to threaten your identity. At first, this drive may have felt motivating. You believed that striving for recognition would bring satisfaction. You assumed that proving yourself would create security. You thought that once others respected you, peace would follow. Yet over chimis, something begasting. The effort to maintain an image required constant energy. The need for validation created tension. The satisfaction you expected never lasted as long as you hoped. Gradually, a quiet shift began to occur. You started focusing less on being impressive and more on being consistent. You became less concerned with comparison and more attentive to growth. You realized that your value does not depend on applause. You discovered that progress can exist without recognition. What once felt like pressure began to lose its importance. This change did not make you less ambitious. It made you more grounded. You began working with intention rather than urgency. You became comfortable with steady progress instead of constant visibility. You learned to appreciate effort even when results were not immediately noticed. These changes created stability because your motivation came from purpose rather than approval. Scripture often connects freedom with identity. Throughout the Bible, individuals who understood their purpose stopped chasing validation. They trusted their calling even when recognition was delayed. They remained faithful in quiet seasons. Their confidence came from clarity, not comparison. Psychologically, releasing the need to prove yourself strengthens self-worth. People who define their value internally experience less anxiety. They become more resilient during setbacks. They make decisions based on principle rather than pressure. This stability creates emotional strength because confidence is no longer dependent on external recognition. Spiritually, this shift often reflects transformation. God frequently teaches individuals to find security in their identity rather than in their achievements. He allows seasons of quiet progress so they can develop discipline. He removes constant validation so they can build confidence from within. These experiences create maturity because they require patience and trust. This process also explains why you may feel calmer about your progress than you once did. You no longer rush to impress others. You focus on improvement rather than comparison. You measure success through growth rather than applause. These changes reveal freedom. Many people later realize that peace began when the need to prove themselves disappeared. They felt less pressure. They experienced greater focus. They developed stronger confidence. What once felt urgent became unnecessary once freedom began to form. When you feel less urgency to prove yourself to others, it is often not because you lost ambition. It may be because you have been given the gift of freedom, the ability to live with confidence, rooted in identity rather than recognition. And through that quiet confidence, God may be guiding you toward a life marked by stability, purpose, and peace. The fourth sign that God may have given you the gift of freedom is this: you have learned to say no when necessary, without carrying the heavy guilt that once followed. There may have been a time in your life when saying no felt almost impossible. You agreed to requests even when you were tired. You accepted responsibilities even when your schedule was already full. You prioritized the comfort of others above your own well-being. You feared disappointing people. You worried that refusal would damage relationships or create tension. As a result, your energy became stretched and your peace became fragile. At first, this pattern may have felt generous. You believed that constant availability showed kindness. You assumed that sacrifice proved commitment. You tried to meet expectations because you valued harmony. Yet, over time something became clear. Always saying yes created exhaustion. It reduced your focus. It made it harder to fulfill the responsibilities that truly mattered. Gradually, a quiet realization began to form. You understood that limits are not selfish. They are protective. You started recognizing the difference between responsibility and overload. You became aware that time and energy are resources that must be managed carefully. You learned that refusing certain demands allows you to honor more important commitments. What once felt like rejection began to reveal itself as wisdom. Scripture often connects freedom with stewardship. Throughout the Bible, individuals entrusted with responsibility were expected to protect their strength and manage their resources. They understood that exhaustion reduces effectiveness. They recognized that balance preserves stability. Their discipline allowed them to serve consistently without losing direction. Psychologically, the ability to say no strengthens self-respect. People who establish healthy limits experience less stress and greater clarity. They maintain focus on priorities. They prevent resentment that can build when obligations exceed capacity. This balance creates emotional stability because expectations become realistic. Spiritually, this shift often reflects maturity. God frequently teaches individuals to protect their peace so they can serve responsibly. He helps them recognize when rest is necessary. He guides them to make decisions that preserve strength. These lessons create endurance because they require discipline and honesty. This process also explains why saying no may feel uncomfortable at first. You may worry about disappointing others. You may feel uncertain about changing expectations. You may hesitate because you care deeply about relationships. Yet Chimi clarity revealed. You begin to see that healthy boundaries strengthen trust rather than weaken it. People learn to respect your limits. Your commitments become more reliable. Your energy becomes more focused. What once felt difficult becomes natural once freedom takes root. Many people later realized that their peace returned when they learned to set limits. They felt less overwhelmed. They regained control of their time. They became more effective in their responsibilities. What once felt selfish became necessary once its purpose became clear. When you are able to say no without carrying guilt, it is often not because you care less. It may be because you have been given the gift of freedom, the ability to protect your energy, preserve your peace, and live with balance. And through that balance, God may be guiding you toward a life marked by clarity, strength, and steady purpose. The fifth sign that God may have given you the gift of freedom is this: you are able to experience peace even when your circumstances remain uncertain. There may have been seasons when life felt unpredictable. Plans changed unexpectedly. Opportunities were delayed. Decisions carried risk. You faced moments when the future was unclear and answers were not immediately available. In the past, situations like these may have created anxiety. You may have felt restless, constantly searching for reassurance. You may have tried to control every detail because uncertainty felt uncomfortable. Yet over Chimi, something to inside you. You noticed that uncertainty no longer created the same level of fear. You still cared about outcomes. You still prepared carefully, but your emotional state remained more stable. You were able to move forward without complete clarity. You learned to function without constant certainty. What once felt overwhelming began to feel manageable. This change did not eliminate responsibility. It created calm. You started trusting your preparation. You relied on your judgment. You focused on the present moment instead of worrying about every possible outcome. Your mind became less reactive and more steady. This stability allowed you to make thoughtful decisions even when conditions were not ideal. Scripture often connects freedom with peace. Throughout the Bible, peace is described as an inner condition that does not depend on external stability. Individuals who trusted God were able to remain calm during uncertainty. They continued working, planning, and moving forward despite unpredictable circumstances. Their confidence came from trust rather than control. Psychologically, peace during uncertainty reflects emotional resilience. People who develop resilience learn to tolerate ambiguity. They understand that not every situation can be predicted. They become comfortable making decisions without perfect information. This ability reduces stress because attention shifts from fear to action. Spiritually, this peace often reflects surrender. God frequently teaches individuals to release the need for total control. He allows uncertainty so they can develop trust. He strengthens patience through waiting. These experiences create maturity because they require confidence without guarantees. This process also explains why you may feel calmer in situations that once caused anxiety. You think more clearly under pressure. You respond more patiently to delay. You focus on solutions rather than fear. These responses reveal growth. Many people later realize that peace became possible when control was no longer necessary. They worried less. They acted more confidently. They trusted their direction. What once felt unstable became manageable once freedom began to form. When you feel peace, even when circumstances are uncertain, it is often not because problems have disappeared. It may be because you have been given the gift of freedom, the ability to remain steady even when life is unpredictable. And through that steady peace, God may be guiding you toward decisions made with clarity, patience, and confidence. The sixth sign that God may have given you the gift of freedom is this: you are no longer defined by your past mistakes in the way you once were. There may have been a time when memories of failure carried significant weight. You replayed conversations in your mind. You remembered decisions you wished you had handled differently. You questioned your judgment. You worried that past mistakes had permanently shaped how others saw you and how you saw yourself. These memories may have created hesitation. They may have made you cautious about new opportunities. They may have caused you to doubt your ability to move forward. At first, this self-awareness can feel responsible. You believed that remembering mistakes would prevent repeating them. You assumed that regret demonstrated maturity. You tried to learn from experience, yet the emotional weight remained. Instead of becoming a lesson, the past sometimes felt like a label, but over Chimi something changed. You started recognizing the difference between responsibility and identity. You understood that mistakes are events, not definitions. You realized that growth requires movement, not constant self-judgment. You began to see your past as a source of instruction rather than condemnation. What once felt like shame gradually became perspective. This shift did not erase your memory. It restored your confidence. You learned to acknowledge mistakes without losing direction. You became willing to try again after setbacks. You stopped assuming that past failure predicted future outcomes. These changes created stability because your identity became rooted in growth rather than regret. Scripture often connects freedom with renewal. Throughout the Bible, individuals who experienced transformation were not defined by their past actions. They learned from their mistakes. They accepted correction. They continued moving forward. Their confidence came from understanding that growth is always possible. Psychologically, releasing past mistakes strengthens resilience. People who view failure as temporary develop stronger motivation. They become more willing to take responsible risks. They recover more quickly after setbacks. This mindset builds confidence because progress becomes visible through learning. Spiritually, this shift often reflects grace. God frequently teaches individuals to see themselves through the lens of growth rather than guilt. He allows them to reflect on mistakes so they can gain wisdom. He encourages them to continue moving forward instead of remaining trapped in regret. These experiences create maturity because they require humility and courage. This process also explains why your relationship with the past may feel different now. You remember mistakes, but they no longer control your emotions. You acknowledge failure, but you do not feel defeated by it. You accept responsibility, yet you continue moving forward. These responses reveal freedom. Many people later realize that peace began when their past stopped defining their future. They felt lighter. They became more confident. They embraced growth. What once felt like limitation became opportunity once freedom began to form. When you are no longer defined by your past mistakes, it is often not because the past disappeared. It may be because you have been given the gift of freedom, the ability to grow beyond failure and move forward with clarity. And through that renewed confidence, God may be guiding you toward a life shaped by learning, resilience, and steady progress. The seventh sign that God may have given you the gift of freedom is this: you have begun to live more honestly. Without the constant pressure to pretend, impress, or maintain an image that does not reflect who you truly are. There may have been a time when you felt the need to present yourself in a certain way. You carefully chose your words to avoid judgment. You adjusted your personality to match expectations. You tried to appear stronger, more confident, or more successful than you actually felt. You believed that acceptance depended on performance. You thought that showing weakness might lead to rejection. At first, this effort may have felt necessary. You wanted to protect your reputation. You wanted to be respected. You wanted to fit into environments where approval mattered. Yet maintaining an image required constant attention. It created tension because you were managing perception instead of living authentically. The distance between who you were and who you presented yourself to be became emotionally exhausting. Over time, something began to shift. You realized that honesty creates peace. You became more comfortable acknowledging your limitations. You allowed yourself to express uncertainty when you did not have answers. You stopped pretending to understand everything. You started speaking with greater sincerity. What once felt risky began to feel relieving. Authenticity replaced performance. This change did not make you careless. It made you grounded. You learned that respect grows through consistency rather than appearance. You discovered that relationships become stronger when honesty replaces perfection. You recognized that stability comes from living truthfully, not impressively. These changes created confidence because your identity became clear. Scripture often connects freedom with truth. Throughout the Bible, individuals who lived in truth experienced deeper peace. They no longer relied on appearances to gain approval. They focused on integrity instead of reputation. Their confidence came from alignment between their values and their actions. Truth created stability because it removed the need for constant performance. Psychologically, Authenticity reduces emotional strain. People who live honestly experience less anxiety because they are not managing multiple identities. They communicate more clearly. They build stronger trust. This consistency strengthens relationships because others sense sincerity. Over time, emotional energy becomes focused on growth instead of appearance. Spiritually, this shift often reflects transformation. God frequently leads individuals toward honesty so they can live with clarity. He teaches them that identity is not built on perfection. He strengthens their confidence through acceptance. These experiences create maturity because they require courage and humility. I remember a season when I felt pressure to appear more confident than I truly was. I believed that showing uncertainty would reduce respect. Yet the more I tried to maintain that image, the more exhausted I became. Eventually, I began speaking more honestly about what I knew and what I was still learning. To my surprise, trust increased rather than decreased. That experience taught me that authenticity strengthens relationships far more than perfection ever could. This message reflects a spiritual understanding shaped through reflection, experience, and growth. Freedom develops gradually. It forms through honesty, self-awareness, and steady discipline. Each step toward authenticity creates stability. Each moment of truth builds confidence. Transformation happens quietly, yet its impact becomes lasting. If something in this message helped you recognize the freedom developing in your life, share in the comments which sign spoke to you the most. You can also write a simple commitment. I choose to live in freedom and truth, because freedom is not the absence of responsibility. It is the courage to live honestly, peacefully, and without fear.